We're old enough to remember when GM sold cars for 15 years, never making money on a car. What kept them going? GM Finance. So the ability to finance a commodity, in this case cars, not only kept them alive, but really thrived. A $40,000 car, if you look at what you pay out over time, is what? $60,000, $70,000, $80,000. Now with these 8-year financings, even more, right? The financial end of it, it allows you the ability to really sell a car to anyone. How many people would buy cars for cash? Not many. Car salesmen would all go bankrupt. We had the same issue with modular water. Modular water systems was crushing it, tripling its revenue each year. And that's literally just selling to the people that have the cash. But you're only addressing 10% or so of the market. The truth is, a small business is not going to deploy $1 million of capital if it doesn't have to. He doesn't want to be in the water business. Water on demand is the GM Finance, while modular water systems is the GM. We can help every single business, theoretically, in the world that wants it.
So what happens when you combine world-class technology with finance and end-to-end service in a $1 trillion asset class that has not yet been funded? Well, you can find out by booking a one-on-one call with me. I will walk you through it. I will answer your questions. David Lynch has already identified this, water, as the investment that will create the world's first trillionaire. Speak with me one-on-one to find out why he feels that way and why I agree. I hope to speak to you soon.
That's an excellent clip by the amazing Ken Berenger. People are arriving fast. Bob Roos, cool intro. For sure, for sure. All right. We have an action-packed briefing tonight. I think you're going to love it. I would say we're on fire, but you already know that. So I'm not going to say it. I'm just not going to say it. That's just as simple as that. All right. Water, the blue gold. All right. Today is May 25th and briefing number 212. I like to say it's basically we've had these briefings since Zoom started, right? Because it's been like 4 years. Before we were doing the Zoom briefings, I was doing Thursday afternoon briefings to brokers. I remember doing that very well in the mid-2010s. And that was great. Except the brokers the whole broker network kind of went away. And that's how we ended up doing these direct briefings, which have proven to be so productive. And Tom Liaco says, nice job. Thank you, sir. All right, let's continue the action here. Obviously, safe harbor statement, disclaimer on our Regulation D offering. That's the one which is water like an oil well, where you get annuities on the water equipment. That is our current offering. The newest unicorn is a water tech company. We got used to hearing about unicorns being tech companies or medical companies, pharma, whatever. Well, they've all kind of taken a dive. They've been overpriced. Think about Apple. The valuation of Apple is equal to the entirety of the Standard & Poor, the S&P 500. All the companies in the S&P, all 500 companies in the S&P 500 are equal to the valuation of Apple. Well, that's great. Apple's doing wonderfully. It's a great company, but doesn't have a 40,000% upside. It has, 8-10% a year, maybe that kind of thing. And that's great. But if you really want to go where the action is, go find where the new unicorns are. In fact, we talk about AI a lot. AI is already overinvested. It's already a popped bubble. Can you believe it? That's how crazy it is. With OpenAI worth $36 billion and a bunch of others, already investments in AI started to trail off. So water tech, let's talk about that. Crunchbase this week announced that it was a big week, a big explosion. It was kind of spread out between a bunch of sectors, but the number one was Gradiant. Now, Gradiant is a water tech startup, and they focus on water-heavy companies, pharma, chip, food and beverage, and other water-demanding industries. And that's smart because obviously, for example, it takes 7 to 8 liters of water to make a liter of beer. So it makes sense to focus on wastewater treatment for these heavy usage users. We happen to be doing the same thing, just not with the gigantic customers. And the other difference is that unless you're Bolt Rock Holdings and Centaurus Capital, you are not able to invest in this Series D. You had to be one of them. In fact, we're going to review the Gradient rounds and so forth. But the point I'm making is the only people that you can invest in are Water on Demand, who offer a way to invest directly in water tech systems. So let's take a look here at Gradiant, shall we? So right here, click on Gradiant, and let's take a look here. They're in Woburn, Mass. They're now at Series D. And let's take a look. Their financials, 6 funding rounds to date. Investors are a bunch, Warburg Pincus, SLB, basically a bunch of high-end funds. They've made 5 acquisitions: Muscat, Water Park Environment, Sonata, CRS, and Sigma. And so they started with their seed round. Let's take a look at what that was. Was with Cranberry, and they raised $1.4 million. That's about right. So that was the seed round, and then, of course, it went on from there. In fact, we can zero in on the people. Here are the co-founder and CEO, board members, etc. And technology is misleading because the technology they show here is how their website is run. It's got nothing to do with their water technology. Signals and news. Okay, so let's take a look here. Sure enough, we have all their funding rounds, and they started with this 1.4 mil, then 6 million from Wave, then 28, another 27, and then they started making their acquisitions. Then they raised a little 105, bada bing, bada boom. So it helps to be an MIT startup, and it helps to be working with top funds. But what's great about this is that while these people are working at the high end, we're working in the middle class of organizations that need 5, 10, 20,000 gallons per day kind of throughput, microbreweries, that kind of thing. Whereas Gradient might perhaps work with Coors. I don't know that they do, but that's the kind of comparison that I would make. Okay, so with that, I'm going to jump back to the news here. And this is a tremendous validation because there has not been a funding this large in wastewater treatment since more than a year. So this is very meaningful. Okay, so we've done the Crunchbase review. Let's take a look at what we've known for some time, and that is that Water on Demand is primarily a network. And I'll show you the network, but basically it all has to flow. Well, to make a network flow, you got to have network management system. And this week we announced that, in fact, we signed a memorandum of understanding regarding acquiring a software as a service developer. Now, this is an interesting company because they've been in business almost 20 years. They are profitable with their existing business. And what they do is a network management type product. And they work with some very nice technology companies. And the acquisition that you see at the bottom here is anticipated to be accretive. What does accretive means? It means it adds profits. Now, I want to set expectations here. It's going to be a little while before this deal is done. You notice that I did not mention the name of the company, primarily because we have not arrived at a price, and we kind of want to keep our options open. We're still dating. We're still speed dating, shall we say. But anyway, we love this company. And as I said here, talks are at an early stage and may not succeed. So it's a framework for that. And the plan is to, again, acquire the stable SaaS business and then build on that to build our water service network. Well, let's take a look at what this is. If you look here, Total Water Management, this is from our third quarter presentation, which you can access on the internet through our press release that announced this particular presentation. All right, so investors on the right put money into the Water on Demand subsidiary, and a deal is done with a customer with an operating contract with price indexing, meaning that there's a way that it automatically goes up with inflation. The good news is probably not as fast as water rates are rising currently in the market. Looking down at the left, you see that Modular Water Systems, which is now part of Water on Demand, goes ahead and builds the system. And now it's commissioned. There's potential reuse, treated water. And then to the right, you see a sensor array. And here's that planned network management acquisition. So everything to the right here, the sensors, the database performance, operation maintenance, the billings and all that has to be done in order to get money flowing back to Water on Demand. And there's a good comparison here, which is another company called Clear. Here it is. And what Clear does is they do the same thing, but for central utilities. Because think about it. A utility delivers you water, fine, and they also take away your dirty water. And so you pay for the water and you pay for the sewage. In some places, it's a flat fee. Like where I live, it's a flat fee per month for the location. In other places, it's based on how much is being treated. But they have to track all that. And then if you stop paying, they have to cut you off. And there has to be a service center. And they have to go, okay, let's take a look. Oh, I see your account, sir. You're using more water than you used to, et cetera. All this stuff is water management. Clear does it at the utility level. All right. And they do a fine company. Nothing wrong with it. Here's all the utilities they work with. But as I pointed out last week, utility space, while it has a large number of mergers and acquisitions deals, M&A deals, the actual dollar value is in services and equipment, not the utilities themselves. So this space is not growing. And so Clear is a leader in a space that is basically, there's the analogy of being, as a pond gets smaller and smaller, then that you end up with one huge fish that just keeps getting bigger and bigger, right? You don't have 10,000 small fish, you have one big fish. And that's what happens with a single space that's been consolidated like that. So having said that, I just wanted to cover the second thing, which is here's that same thing, but with the actual numbered stages. Number 1, investing. Number 2, the inflation index contract. Number 3, building. Number 4, the cloud connected network. That's what we're investing in. Managing a billing, again, investment. And finally, shares to investors and partners. The investors and partners need to know what the heck they're getting in terms of profit shares, and that's part of the system. So yes, it's about delivering machines to clients, but if you don't have that framework in which data flows, then you've got nothing. And that's why it's so important. Okay. And by the way, Dan Early built very good software for quoting systems, and that is right at the bottom there. And that will hopefully eventually dovetail to that. And Sky Logan, who is the CEO of Philanthro Investors, our great partner, says, I love the plan. We read the SaaS, software as a service, whoever it will end up being will be a great acquire for the WOD network. Thank you very much. James Wright says, greeting everyone, missed last week. Okay, so let's continue here. Now you know why this is important. Well, let's play the interview that I did this week on New to the Street. And as you know, they end up running on Newsmax, Bloomberg, and Fox Business as sponsored interviews. So we get a lot of exposure, and we usually grab the Newsmax one and we put that out. But meanwhile, here is what it will look like.
Origin Clear is doing some innovative things with water and trying to position the company and society for the future of water. And with me is the CEO, Riggs Eckelberry, to talk about what's going on. And Riggs, it was so interesting to see how hot water tech is. There's a new unicorn, basically a $1 billion valuation of a private company that is in this space. So tell me about that and just the whole industry in general, where it's at right now.
Well, first of all, I'm so sorry that I'm not with you physically because A, I love being with you, but also the amazing food in New York and hanging out with Vince and the team. But at least we'll get the news across. You're right that water tech is heating up. In fact, Gradiant, which was incubated at MIT, became a unicorn this week. It was the biggest deal on Crunchbase. And what's interesting is that they're not doing what they've chosen is to really focus on water-heavy industries, pharmaceutical, chip companies, food and beverage. When you make beer, it takes 7 or 8 liters of water to make 1 liter of beer, for example, right? So they've really chosen to focus in on that. But in fact, so are we. We have business in the same space. And I think everybody's realizing that they got to start treating the water so as to reuse it, reduce water usage overall. We've heard about these terrible droughts and so forth. Kansas right now, in fact, is going through such a drought that they're literally liquidating entire wheat fields with Roundup because they don't think they can get the wheat. So we've got to do something about the water. And that's why Gradiant became a unicorn this last week. What's also special is that we created something called Water on Demand, which is the only way that regular people can invest in this exciting new space, because You and me, we can invest in Gradient. You and me, we can't invest in Seven Seas. That's Morgan Stanley Infrastructure Partners. We can't invest in Cambrian, which is also VC. But you and I can invest in water on demand, kind of like the same way people invest in an oil well. So all people have to do is go to waterondemand.net, click on Invest Now, and then they'll be talking to somebody you know very, very well, which is Ken Berenger, the co-creator of Water on Demand.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we've talked before about how you've got this huge industry, water, that is changing dramatically, but people can't and mostly can't take advantage of that with buying a stock or something like that. But this is a way they can have exposure to that, is with Origin Clear, being an investor in there. And they just go to the website and look into it. They can get some information there.
Water now is becoming an investable asset with, the standard share of gross profits and so forth. The same way you might think of a oil well partnership, pretty much the same model. And what's happening is anytime you have a government monopoly that breaks up, you have tremendous opportunity. Remember the AT&T breakup resulted in MCI, the baby bells, but eventually the internet. We're seeing the same thing happen in water, and there's many, many more unicorn deals to come.
Okay. And let's talk about water tech and how you have acquired a tech system. So explain that acquisition and how that is strategically important to the company.
Well, it's an initial letter of intent, so it's non-binding. Imagine your municipal utility that deliver water and they take your dirty water and they bill you. And if you don't pay, then they cut you off and they have to meet certain standards. Well, imagine that all that scaled down to a business like a brewery, right? Well, you need to have the same functionality, an operating system that needs to happen for the private businesses that have the same problem. So we signed an initial letter of intent with a fine developer that has their own Fortune 500 customers. They've been around for almost 20 years. They're a great company, and we intend to let that business continue because it's not a bad business, and then use their expertise to build this operating system. But I caution that this deal may not happen because it's at the early stage, and it's certainly not going to happen for a few months, but we will be building. This is our stake in the ground. We have to have a software or high-tech or digital element to this network, not just hardware.
Okay. So yeah, even if this deal doesn't come to fruition, you're still looking at that software part of the business to execute what you want to do, basically. You just released your 10Q, your quarterly report. So let's talk a little business. Give me a summary of what that said.
I'm going to give you just the top line. First of all, revenue for the company Origin Clear continued to grow. We nearly doubled Q1 of 2022 to Q1 of 2023 of this year. Revenue for the 3 months ending March 31st was 163% of the same quarter last year. It went from 1.2 million to roughly 2 million. So we're very happy about that. But what's even more important is the modular water systems business, which is these water systems in a box that we've incubated since 2018. They contributed 58% of that. So it's actually contributing a bigger and bigger piece of that. And they're right on their forecast, and they're remaining profitable as a business center. Now, here's what's cool. Subsequently, we transferred modular water to water on demand. The basic concept is, if you're going to sell cars, how many $100,000 cars are sold for cash? Basically none, right? So you have a GM, you have a GM Financial, and then you have an extended warranty network. Well, we're replicating the same thing in water, where GM, is modular water systems. They build these assembly line water systems. GM Financial, quote unquote, would be the water on demand component of like, oh, you're a brewer, Jane. You need water treated here. Just sign here. We take care of it. No cash up front or minimal cash up front. And then finally, continuous service contracts to make sure that it's up and running. We're replicating the same auto industry model in water. We published a presentation, an updated presentation, in which we made forecasts for water on demand, including modular water systems. And I covered it in my last CEO briefing. I strongly encourage interested people to join my weekly CEO briefing. We're now up to 212. And basically, we've done it since Zoom started. And all the people have to do is go to oc.gold/CEO. So oc.gold/CEO, or just go to originclear.com and we'll invite you there. Join me. We love to tell you the latest that's happening.
Yeah. Well, that's a great idea for people that are thinking about investing in water and don't know the space and want to learn more about the company and make sure it's what they want to do. They can go and get it straight from you. What's going on? So
Well, not only that, they can get it from New to the Street from Jane King.
that's right. So, yes. Well, I just, provide the platform for you to tell your story. Always so interesting, Riggs, to hear about what Origin Clear is doing. Thank you for joining us.
Well, I do love Jane King. She is super cool. And I think that was a great segment that covered what was going on. And now I'm going to go ahead and review what I brought up in the interview, which is our quarterly filing. So let's take a look at that, shall we? All right. We continued our substantial revenue growth. And as I mentioned in the interview, that revenue for the 3 months ending March 31st of this year was 163% of revenue in the same quarter last year. So it went from 1.2 to roughly 2.2 million. So I like to say it's almost double, but it's not really. I mean, but it's a nice jump, isn't it? Actually, last year's first quarter was a loss, which was made up later in the year. But this year we had a very nice gross profit. Typically, the early part of the year is fairly slow as people's budgets are not yet kicked in. And later in the year, things start to really happen as people get into use it or lose it kind of budget modalities. So the summer and the fall start to get really cranking, but we actually had a nice little profit. And meanwhile, cost of sales was somewhat increased, roughly in line, more or less with the revenue increase. I didn't actually do the numbers there. We continue to have loss from operations primarily because we are aggressively investing in our operations, but most importantly, in our water on demand subsidiary. And that is been a major focus of the team led by Ken Berenger. All right, so here at Modular Water Systems, which at the time up until April, so remember this is January, February, March, contributed 58% of the total revenue. And that I'll show you in a second how that works with the graphs. The gross profit was close to the forecast. And then subsequently, we transferred Modular Water Systems to Water on Demand, which gave us a bunch of shares for that. Remember, it's kind of circular thing because we continue to own water, as biggest owner of Water on Demand. And so we have a major stake anyway. We are very happy with the dedication of the team led by Tom Marchesella, our COO. And Dan Early is just an amazing leader in continuing to make Modular Water Systems happen. And he's being backed up by a growing team. And they're doing a great job with managing costs, cash flow, and growing. All right, so let's take a look at what the graphs look like. Sure enough, here you go. We had forecast, and I just want to mention that the 2022 there is shown as a forecast. It actually roughly came through at that number. We didn't publish it as separate numbers, which is why I have not made it an exact number, but we were within, a few $100, less than $100,000 of that number. So we made 2021 was good, 2022 was good. Now 2023, we forecast about 4 million, and we're well ahead of that with our first quarter revenue. So that's a beautiful thing. And then so Modular Water is really helping the Water on Demand revenue, because you see how this works is that we believe Water on Demand is going to, the GM financial side, right, and the extended warranty side is going to generate a lot more revenue than Modular Water, just because it's easier to spend money than to build water systems, and not easier, it's just happens faster typically. So we see that revving up while Modular Water continues to grow. That's number one. Now let's take a look at gross profits, and you see this happening here. 1,346,000 divided by 4 is 336,500, and we came in at 314,000, so that's fine. Look at the gross margins, almost 30%. That's amazing. That's the beauty of a standardized product line that you're able to replicate. And, whereas Progressive Water Systems does some huge contracts and they're doing amazing work, they do everything. Oh, you want a $5 million system? You want a $200,000 system, et cetera. Well, Modular Water has, 3 or 4 sizes for each product line, 3 or 4 sizes of pump station, 3 or 4 sizes of wastewater treatment system, et cetera. And so they've standardized, and this is Dan Early's mantra, is to keep things standardized so we can get into assembly line, and it reflects in that gross margin. A beautiful number for water. I mean, believe me, that's a good number. All right. And with that, I am going to flip into the freewheeling discussion.
Yeah, so great briefing. The interview with Jane is always good. She makes you look good because she asks really smart questions, which is terrific. Couple of things that kind of going back to David Lynch's comment from Clear. Now, yes, he's an interested party in saying that the first trillionaire will be an investor in water. But he's also a learned party, right? That's not just a spitballing out there, right?
Well, he's providing utility software to major utilities. So that's great.
And it's going to be big business, but he's in a shrinking market, right?
Well, it's a market that's consolidating is a better term for it, right? Because the same way that mainframes became the cloud is huge.
That's true. Yeah, it didn't go away. It transformed. Okay, fair enough. When you saw the institutional participation in Gradiant, it's interesting to note that, Lynch's statement with, the first trillionaire will be a water investor. I don't know who it'll be. I know who it won't be. It won't be a late stage investor, right? It will have to, you just can't create that kind of a wealth as an investor, as a late stage kind of play it safe player. It's going to be somebody early. It'll be because that can only be attained through the leverage of being a very early player, right? So venture capital firms, there's really two decisions to make. Those investors have to make two decisions. Do they go the VC route? Which, look, venture capital is great, but before a company has even sold anything, I couldn't find anything in Gradient's on Crunchbase's site that Gradient is actually there. When you look up at their financials, it's just the money they raised. I know money's coming in. I don't know that anything's going out yet.
That's a really good.
I had a few minutes to look at it, so I didn't want to be distracted because I was rapt by your presentation. I needed to pay attention. But I was writing notes.
Here's the other problem that they have. Similar companies these are not water companies, right? So the AI, clean energy, clean tech, environmental.
Right.
There's no water companies. In other words, Gradient is a unicorn, but it's also kind of a black swan, right? It's sort of sitting out there being like, hey, this is us. The space, it's so early into space that I liked, again, we've talked a lot about Apple 1984. Well, back in 1984, you had very early stage IBM PC. You were still at the 8-bit chip because I was there. We were just on the verge of the 286 processor. But then the big news was the Macintosh and the Lisa and so forth. And there was no way to compare Apple with anything else, right?
Right.
And we're in a similar situation here.
Right. It was an entity unto itself at the time. And maybe that's the case with Gradiant. But here's the thing. That trillionaire won't be a late stage investor. That is a certainty. So early investment will be key. So an early investor has a decision to make. And when I say early, I mean, it's probably going to be someone institutional size. When you invest in VC, there really is tremendous principal risk. These deals could just evaporate. There's no market to liquidate your holdings, at a warning sign or something like that. If you know what I mean, right? So they can go VC route, or they can go to an already public company potentially. So, and when a company has sales and business and is trying to really disrupt something, I think the risk is a little bit less. So the idea is this. A company.
Gene Tully. Oh boy, Gene Tully's getting a little sassy. Ken's on thick. Ken, dazzling with brilliance, baffling with your bullshit. Gene, we love you so much. That's a beautiful thing. You're a wacko dude. Actually, it's very interesting because I don't think it's possible to lay it on too thick. Let's take a look, for example, at the spaces that Gradiant is in. They are in microelectronics, right? So chip fabrication requires, they often say that a single hair in the water for a chip factory shuts down the entire chip factory. Pharmaceuticals, similar problem. Lots of different kinds of water. Mining not only needs clean water, but it has to detox the water, right? Is extremely messed up. food and beverage, large quantities are used, and then they're in refining and chemicals. Again, very, very dirty business. Then we get into renewables, like solar voltaic panel production requires, it's like a chip factory, basically. And they're talking about conventional power generation, which we have a major client on Progressive Water side, so we know very, very well. This is exactly what we're doing for that client. So that's a beautiful thing. And finally, textiles. If you're in the rag industry, you know it's a lot of water. Our friend in Mexico tells us that. So lots of interesting things going on, but these are spaces that they're not the only ones in there. We're competing very, very well in them. But what we've learned is that the action is in the mid-range, 5, 10, 20, 25,000 gallons per day, not, 500,000 gallons per day. Exactly.
There are far more, there are an infinitely greater number of those end users, right? Also, and what's also that has to be stated is that the operations and maintenance on 1,000 systems is an order of magnitude more profitable than the operations and maintenance on a $100 million system. Like, remember I used to say, if you're Anheuser-Busch, if you're Pepsi, Gradiant is building, a company like Gradiant is building your system, right? It's that big $100 million company, that $100 million system. They're going to pay for it, and there's going to be an O&M attached to it. But it's the the hundreds of or thousands of companies. So again, getting back to the, how the street views this, I think the company that is extraordinarily disruptive, right? But I think also a company that, is public also actually bears less risk to that early, because look, early investors have to weigh risk, right? I think the public company that's actually got a base business becomes less risky. So I think that if you can be a company that'll have the combination of the two, I think will be very, very attractive.
Well, that's very well put.
That future potential trillionaire, right?
There's that famous story that I read about the early Airbnb people who they literally had like 2 pennies to rub together, and they were touring all the VCs in the San Francisco area, and somehow somebody had convinced them to create a cereal box branded Airbnb, and they were handing these out to each VC.
Yeah.
One VC turned them down, and to this day he has that cereal box on his desk to remind him of the perils of not investing early. But here's the problem for those VCs. It's a win-lose. In other words, they invest in it, and out of 10 investments, they might clear one. Actually, it takes about 30 investments to get a real hitter. And as you say, the rest just go away. The money gets...
but I'll say it's literally gone. It's gone, right? Yeah. It's 100% downside. Whereas we're not going to address that last comment.
No, but I want to talk about the HOA thing. But let me just get back to you for a second here. You made a really great point about modular water, our base business being on plan, right? Yeah. Did more than $1 million in the Q1 with regular sales. This is not water on demand sales, this is regular sales. So we've got a base business that is profitable.
A foundation. In other words, yes, what we're doing is massive in its potential scale as far as aspiration goes. But you're starting with a foundation of the business that modular water systems in without the operations and maintenance attachment, which is infinitely more profitable, and without the finance attachment, which is also infinitely more profitable. You have a base that I think is going to be $26 billion by 2030, Riggs, right? Who is that? That's the small scale down systems. Who's that selling to? It's selling to the guys who have the money. So therefore, if we know 80 or 90% of the business can't afford it, it's not unreasonable to say that market could be expanded by five or sevenfold if you can apply the finance piece and then the operations and maintenance piece. Of course, this like you said, BMW says that it's a finance company that also happens to sell cars. They don't make their money selling cars. They make their money on the long-term the maintenance contracts, or what do they call them? Warranties, right? The warranties.
The warranties,
of course, the finance, right? That's where their profits are.
Services have that huge margin, right?
80 to 100%, I think it was.
It's not 100%. They're never 100%. There's no such thing as 100% margin.
That's true. That's true. 100%, 80%. I think it was 80% margins or something like that.
Well, our friend in Mexico, who's our dear friend there, operates a services business, which is trucking away wastewater and treating it at a central facility. He's got 80% margins. Okay.
80%. Okay.
He's got a very simple business. I'm not saying that, but for sure, look at modular water is achieving 27% margins. That is huge for hardware.
That's what, almost double the industry?
Well, no, because now you're getting into net profits versus gross profits. I don't want to get the gross margin at 27% is excellent, but they're not going to get 50 or 60 or 80. It's
right.
not going to happen.
You can't do it. You can't do it.
Services side adds that layer of quote unquote fat. Now,
but operations and maintenance is a simple business.
No, I agree.
You know, it is a simple business.
Yes, for the guy doing the delivery, but
right.
people coordinating it. That's why we have to have software. Right.
That's right.
You know, I was one of those old white guys who bought a Tesla. And so at
least it wasn't a Corvette and you were having a midlife crisis.
Right. No, I got the 3 rows so that my wife could always have it as a backup for the school bus. But anyway, and it's happened more than once. But the point is that Tesla has a whole environment that supports it. There's an app and there's a whole software environment, tracks, this, that, and the other thing. So the point I'm making is they have that services layer on top of the hardware. That is the modern model. And that's actually critical because as Elon Musk has pointed out, you don't have a business if you can't scale it, right?
You saw the news with Ford. So Ford is bleeding red ink on their electric vehicle. In other words, they're relying on their gas vehicles to kind of carry them through the electric vehicle portion. They just got an agreement to be able to share their supercharger network with Tesla. So he who builds the network first.
And so that's why having that network on the ground with the maintainers that we're doing, we're starting with Envirogen, which is our first partner, is so powerful. I wanted to address Brian Carter's comment, economically feasible for a large HOA, homeowners association, to purchase gray water or reclaimed and use WOD as a supplier to their doors. Well, that's a good question. Actually, what we are doing for housing developments right now, and Modular Water has more than one housing development project, but we've been documenting one as a case study that's going to come out, and that is where we treat all their black water and help them recycle their gray water, complete end to end, and they don't have to be connected to the sewage. Now, this is super important in North Texas, which is growing far faster than infrastructure. And so we had that video a few weeks ago in Denison, Texas, just shy of the Oklahoma border, that discussed how the northern Texas market is just going insane, and they don't have time to put in sewage. And so you drop in these self-sufficient black water recirculation systems that churn out the gray water, and that's your answer, Brian. So you'll be hearing much more about this.
So so the housing market, I think it's going to be extraordinarily appealing to guys like us, guys like me, that wants to develop residential real estate. I myself am eyeing a very large lot. That, by the way, it's still for sale. You know why?
No sewage.
They can't develop it.
But I thought you were doing crypto, Ken.
I retired from crypto. I decided to just donate my money to what is it? I think it was a prince from Kenya. I think was it Kenya or was it?
Oh, it was Russia.
I think he was from Kenya. He was a prince, and I was just going to give him the money, and he's going to hit me back. I'm going to make a lot on that. And it was actually, I calculated my chances were better with the Kenyan prince than they were with crypto. No, look, crypto will have its day. The reality is that I believe there'll have to be practical applications, that tokens as gimmicks and stuff like that. It is what it is. But that corridor that's being built faster than the infrastructure ever could. Okay. Think about that on a global scale. How about building homes where infrastructure just is never going to go? It's just never going to go, right? So we talk about overpopulation globally, Riggs, because we talk about people being concentrated. Why are they concentrated there? Because that's where the vital services are, the electric, the gas, the water, and stuff like that. the ability to look, there's plenty of surface area for mankind to spread out. We just didn't build a system that would accommodate for that. But essentially, by doing what we're doing, by decentralizing infrastructure, we can actually spread humanity over a much larger surface area on Earth and not strain those pinch points. Does that make sense?
Not only that, we've been discussing for the past few weeks the ongoing reshoring of industry from China. I personally know at least two friends who are actively doing that. And we've been told that the entire frontier area south of Tijuana and Mexicali and
that peninsula is at what did he say, 110% employment, and they're 1 million square feet short of manufacturing floor space.
Now that's only the beginning.
I know.
Now we're not investing in those factories, but there's no infrastructure. Therefore, but those factories, if they want to comply with the treaty, the North American Treaty, which is called whatever it's called, it was NAFTA and it's called something else.
It's the America, Canada, and Mexico Alliance, I think, or something along those lines, right? Something pretty literal.
If they want to comply with that, then they're going to have water treatment, and there won't be time for the utilities. So we are going to be looking at a boom for the next 20, 25 years of integrated factories coming in, state-of-the-art, AI, robotics, et cetera, with attached water systems. I'm so excited about that, I believe, and it's already begun. Nobody's waiting. We were supposed, Peter Zehan was saying, oh, there's going to be 5 years of turbulence and then it kicks in. No. Mm-hmm. It's happening right now.
No, it's already happening. I agree. I mean, there may be turbulence, but there's going to be tremendous growth. Look, the thing is, they'll be able to slap these big warehouse-style steel buildings, 300 feet by 3. I mean, you can put those together in weeks, right? So that's
then a modular system attached,
right? Like a boxable type. I'm not pitching another guy's deal here, but that sort of kind of drop in place, unfold it, right, and then put in infrastructure.
So I'm going to start wrapping things up. It's been really interesting reviewing all this. You should talk to Ken to get what's going on. If you're interested in what's happening, believe me, there is a lot happening. oc.go/Ken. That will get you to Charles, the appointment setter, who will coordinate, because right now Ken is like a one-arm paper hanger. Oh my gosh, he is some busy guy, and never mind his fluttering background.
I know. New computer this weekend. I already promised.
But please contact him. And the other thing we want to say is fill out your Zoom survey at the end, because we love the data that we get. All right, everyone, thank you. It's been wonderful talking, and let's stay in close touch. Do come back to the briefing, because there's amazing things happening. Stay in close touch. If you're interested in what's happening and you want to be part of it, then schedule with oc.gold/Ken, and do come back. We love having you guys and gals in the briefing. Thank you all, and have a great night. Peace, kindness, joy, love, and happiness, as they used to say.